We are back. You are chatting with John P. Today, I'm going to be talking about some watches that I think would be great for the fall time or the autumn. Now, of course, the seasons are a little bit different just depending on where you are in the world. It might be that you do live in a location where you're watching this video that, maybe this doesn't make total sense for you, but at least for those of you that are somewhat close to where I am, at least in terms of the time zone and the physical location, it might apply to you. And these watches are going to have a little bit of some red. That's why I have the red background today instead of blue, or maybe some browns and kind of that color scheme. So depending on the time of year where you are or just where you live, this might be ultra applicable to you. I thought it'd be cool to switch up. Also, we have Halloween coming up as well. It's pretty crazy, honestly, because of COVID. It seems like everything is just kind of with the times here going so quickly. What is it? September 20th. So maybe about a month we'll have Halloween for those of you that get into that as well. Pretty crazy, right, guys? Also, please do not forget to check out DelrayWatch.com, where we had one of these watches, but it flew out just so quickly because it's actually pretty rare. But we have so many other watches, so do not fear there. On the wrist today, I have a vintage Enocar Sherpa guide. Love this watch. Awesome travel watch. Been doing a little bit of that recently for some project that I am working on here. Once again, Delray Watch. Love this vintage watch. Very cool also for the fall time. So the first watch, if you're not familiar, Omega released a Speedmaster that had a brown dial, a Speedmaster Professional in recent times within, not considered vintage yet, but this watch is a topic that comes up between those that are maybe a little bit new to watch collecting, and they say, no, the Speedmaster Professional only has the black dial. Now they have, so many other limited editions, but this one, depending on where you see it and the pictures you see, it could look like potentially just a black dial Omega Speedmaster Professional, but I can assure you that they did release a brown chocolate dial. It's called the, I think it's actually nicknamed the brown chocolate. I mean, not really creative, but nonetheless, I absolutely love this one. You will have to pay a bit of a premium out there in the pre-owned market. You can only get it pre-owned. It is discontinued, but it maybe $1,500 above what you would pay for a normal Speedmaster Professional, but it does have a see-through case back as well, so you can see the movement. You can kind of geek out about that if that's kind of what you're into, and I think a lot of us are probably into that. We're talking about watches and listening to watches on the internet. So the brown dial chocolate Speedmaster Professional, trying to look like a vintage watch. That's where Omega went with it. And I also think that this watch is going to be very collectible and desirable in the future, especially if that brown even changes a little bit. I don't know that it will, because it was created with modern techniques, and it's probably made to be pretty resistant, especially with the case construction letting air in, which is what contributes to aging colored dials, and I'll actually mention that later. So something to keep on your radar, something to look out for. Definitely a cool autumn watch. Next, Grand Seiko. I know, the Grand Seiko Heritage Seasons Collection Autumn. Bit of like beating a dead horse on this one, guys, especially if you're familiar with Grand Seiko, and a lot of people have been talking about them for the right reasons, though, right? Grand Seiko really has upped their quality. They've always done a pretty good job, but in the last 5 years, they've made such a push, especially for the US market, in that upper luxury market. They put the Zaratsu finish top to bottom on their pieces, and they really do a great job. But this particular example has that beautiful red with the gold accents. It's a little bit of a darker gold. It looks such like fall, autumn in Japan. I've not been to Japan, let alone in the autumn, but looking at pictures, especially in the pictures from Grand Seiko, it certainly does fit the bill. I think it's very cool. Gold is not really for me, but just the hint, the splash of gold on that case and kind of that contrast just makes it seem like maybe another color of a leaf that's been aging or dying or falling off the trees. Very cool. Literally, the name autumn is in the name of the watch, so how could you find a better fitting watch for autumn than an autumn watch? Next, we have Rolex Root Beer. Now, I myself prefer the 5-digit reference, the vintage Rolex GMT Master Root Beer two-tone, especially I love it with the nipple dial. Yes, I said that. Someone out there is going to giggle that I said the word nipple, but it is a nipple dial. And when Rolex released this two-tone root beer, the reference 126711, I think that they just didn't produce a lot of them, right? Because when you look at the pre-owned prices, we're only talking a few $1,000s over retail, and for sports model Rolex, that's really not that much over retail. I'm not shocked. It's not shocking in the least bit. A little bit disturbing, but certainly not shocking. We all know this. I make videos talking about it. But personally, I do like this, but you don't see it. You don't see it in the cases, of course, but you also don't see it on the wrists, and you don't see this from other dealers selling this watch. We had one in stock total, not in the full gold, but we had it in two-tone, and it did go pretty quickly. But we at Delray Watch also don't get a lot of calls and people wanting us to find them this watch either. So I am actually really curious, guys. Do you prefer the original or this one, the remake, or do you think maybe two-tone not for you? I would love to hear about it in the comments below, because once again, I personally really enjoy this watch, but I don't see other people either trying to get it or adding it to their collection. I don't know if it's a function of Rolex talking about it or not talking about it. Love to hear it. Comments below. Next, we have a watch by a Russian watchmaker. Now, don't tune out just yet, because these are very high quality. We had one available, but it did go very quickly because they've become desirable and they've developed into a cult following watch. This is a Konstantin Chaikin. Yes, the watches are produced in Russia, but specifically for this lineup, he has a Joker, which was the original. He has a clown, he has a mouse, he has a jack-o'-lantern, he has a Dracula, and a couple of others, among many other way more complicated offerings, including some little sculptures, kind of in the same vein of MB&F, but a little bit more classic design. Though I think he also has like a lunar rover type model. Konstantin Chaikin is a really great watchmaker. You can see it in the movements, and while he does use ETA movements, for example, this specific line I'm talking about that uses the ETA 2824, but there'll be a picture here, and you can see that's heavily modified with the moon phase as well as the functions to move the eyes. So the eyes on the dial, they move for these characters to actually display the time, so there's not hands in the traditional sense. And I think that's just so cool. It's 42 millimeters, but when I put it on my wrist, it does wear a little bit bigger. It's thicker, it's clunkier. I mean, he did develop the module from scratch that sits on top of the movement, but it's just cool all around. When these came out, I think maybe 8 years ago, 9, maybe even 10 years ago now, sometime around then, these watches were selling for $5,000 or $6,000. Now the retail's double that, and they trade triple that out on the market because he only produces between, you know, maybe 25 to 80 or 90, 100 pieces, and super limited, super high quality. And to be very honest, not a lot of these actually find their way outside of Russia for so many different reasons. Very cool watchmaker. At least check him out on his website. Check out Konstantin Chaikin. Very cool things, more works of art, but yet still, it's almost like having a Corum bubble, but actually including high-end horology. Very cool. I could talk about this guy all day. And lastly, I want to give an honorable mention to tropical dials. Now, there'll be a picture of a tropical dial here, what I think is a proper tropical dial, which means the watch was somewhat exposed to the sun or the elements and it aged, and generally different looks of the aging fetch premiums on the watch, depending what the watch is. I mean, if the watch is not desirable in the first place, probably not getting a high premium, but if it's something like an interesting Rolex, probably going to get a premium, especially if it's a super high-end, vintage, collectible, desirable Rolex. But when we jump into other forms of damage, right, because technically patina and tropical dials are damage, but it's damage that are sought after because of the uniformity typically, or at least historically. But running into just straight out water damage, you can see a picture here of a watch that I think should just be considered water damage. I'm not going to say where that's from because honestly there are some collectors that don't mind the water damage, or they think it looks cool. For example, I've had vintage watches in my collection and there's been some damage, but I just thought it looked interesting, or I thought it was cool. I'm not going to go out and call it tropical because tropical historically means something a little bit different. But if you like damage, you like water damage, you like feeling kind of like it's an antiquity or it's a piece of history. That's very cool, and that's a whole nother category of collectors. But I want to throw that out there because I think just for the fall and for the autumn, kind of that aging somehow fits into that theme. What do you guys think? Comments below. Are there any other watches that you think are great for autumn or the fall? I know I left out a few, but there's a bunch of watches out there that are Halloween themed. Feel free to leave those in the comments below, even though that's not universally celebrated across the world. Guys, back to work for me. Hopefully you're all having a great day, and we'll see you next time. You've been chatting with John P. Ciao.